Sumerian tablets are probably one of the oldest form of written record that we have.
This little piece of clay from the library's collections is packed full of information from 4,200 years ago.
A team of researchers pulled tablet 63 out of storage at the British Museum last year and ran the Sumerian text through modern translation software. What came back didn't match the version in the published catalog, not even close. The official translation talks about eclipses and planetary movements. The real text talks about the moon, and it doesn't describe it the way anyone in 2000 BCE should have been able to describe it. Scholars have known for over 100 years. They never published what they found, and once you hear it, you'll understand exactly why.
There are 6 professionally written lines of cuneiform script on it, and this script is already 1,000 years old.
The tablet they tried to bury. To understand how that tablet ended up on her desk, we have to go back to 1849. British archaeologist Austen Henry Layard is pulling artifacts from the ruins of ancient Nineveh, buried beneath centuries of sand in what is now modern-day Iraq. He doesn't know it yet, but one of the clay pieces in the crate he's about to ship home is going to cause a quiet panic in academic circles a century later. The tablet is covered in wedge-shaped marks pressed into the clay with surgical precision. Cuneiform, the language of the Sumerians, one of the oldest civilizations on Earth, dating back over 5,000 years. Layard ships hundreds of these tablets back to the British Museum, where they sit in storage for decades. Nobody can read them. The language is dead. Then in the late 1800s, scholars crack the cuneiform code and start translating one tablet at a time.
Descends from the first pictographic Sumerian script of about 3,200 BC.
Most of what they find is administrative paperwork, trade records, grain inventories, lists of kings. Then they get to one tablet in particular, and what it describes about the moon should have been impossible for anyone in 2000 BCE to know. The tablet in question is catalogued as Enuma Anu Enlil, Tablet 63. It's part of a series of 70 tablets that together comprise one of the oldest astronomical texts ever discovered. Most academic translations focus exclusively on the safe parts: predictions of eclipses, the movement of planets, the rising and setting of Venus, standard ancient sky watching that historians use to prove the Sumerians were intelligent observers of the heavens. Nothing controversial, nothing that threatens the established timeline. But there's a passage in the middle of Tablet 63 that gets glossed over in every university translation, a section that describes the moon's arrival in Earth's orbit not as a natural cosmic event, but as a deliberate act of placement. The text uses the Sumerian word deeb. It means to carry, to transport, to bring, not to observe, not to worship, to transport. The moon, according to this tablet, was brought here, moved into position. And the linguistic precision matters because the Sumerians had a very specific word for natural celestial objects. The word was mu. It meant star, a body that exists on its own. But when the tablet refers to the moon in this specific passage, it doesn't use mu. It uses the word kakab. And kakab doesn't translate to star or celestial body. It translates closer to vessel, to container. A functional object, not a passive one. Something designed to hold or to carry. So ask yourself this: why would the Sumerians use that word? Unless they understood the moon as something fundamentally different from the stars and planets they observed every night for centuries. Zecharia Sitchin was the first modern researcher to drag this question into daylight. In the 1970s, working out of a study in New York with stacks of cuneiform photographs from museums across Europe, he published a book called The 12th Planet. His work was controversial from day one. Mainstream scholars dismissed him immediately. Fringe pseudoscience. The ramblings of someone trying to sell books by misinterpreting ancient texts. That's the official line. But here's what they don't tell you. Sitchin wasn't some random conspiracy theorist. He had a formal background in ancient Hebrew, Aramaic, and other Semitic languages. He studied at the London School of Economics. He spent decades cross-referencing Sumerian, Akkadian, and Babylonian cuneiform texts. He didn't read one tablet and make wild claims. He compared hundreds of them, looking for patterns and linguistic consistency.
The impression of a cylinder seal on a tablet from about 2100 BC
And what he found about the moon kept showing up, again and again. Not as debris from some ancient planetary collision, not as a cosmic accident, but as something deliberately placed in Earth's orbit by beings the Sumerians called the Anunnaki, a word that translates to those who from heaven to earth came. The academic establishment rejected his conclusions outright, but here's the part nobody likes to talk about. They never actually disproved his translations. They just ignored them. They called them sensational. When researchers pressed them to show, line by line, exactly where Sitchin had mistranslated, they couldn't produce a rebuttal. They just dismissed the entire premise as impossible and moved on. That's not scholarship. That's gatekeeping. And the next section of Tablet 63 is exactly what they were gatekeeping against. What is inside the moon? So, what does the tablet actually claim is inside the moon? The text describes a series of chambers arranged in a pattern the Sumerians called Akur Gal, which literally translates to Great House of the Mountain. The Sumerian term means house, not in the domestic sense. It refers to a structure, a constructed space, a building with specific functions. These weren't natural caverns formed by lava or impact craters. According to the tablet, they were built, designed. One chamber was designated for the observation of Earth's waters, a station positioned to monitor the oceans, lakes, and rivers below. Another chamber was described as the place of tidal regulation, a mechanism that somehow controlled the ebb and flow of the seas. Now, hold on. Think about that for a second. Modern science tells us the moon's gravity is what causes tides on Earth, pulling the oceans back and forth in a rhythmic cycle. But the Sumerian text implies this wasn't a passive gravitational effect. It was an active process. Something inside the moon was managing it. A third section describes what translates to the engine of orbital maintenance, a system that kept the moon locked in its position relative to Earth, preventing it from drifting away or spiraling closer. And here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. The text explicitly states that the moon's core had been hollowed out, not empty because of natural formation, not porous because of ancient volcanic activity. Excavated. The Sumerian word sig appears repeatedly in this section. It means to cut, to carve, to remove material with purpose. Someone took a planetary body, removed its interior, and installed infrastructure inside it. That's what the clay says, word for word, by people who supposedly didn't even know how to forge iron. And here's the part that should make you sit up.
The king, we know he's the king because he has the king's characteristic turban.
When modern science finally got the chance to test the moon, the data didn't contradict the tablet. The data lined up with the tablet word for word. If ancient mysteries and forbidden history are your thing, hit subscribe before we go any further. What you're about to hear about Apollo 12, Apollo 14, and what NASA actually recorded is the part most channels won't touch. Stay with me. NASA heard it ring. In November 1969, NASA's Apollo 12 mission deliberately crashed the ascent stage of their lunar module into the moon's surface. It wasn't an accident, it was a controlled experiment. The crew had placed seismometers on the surface during the Apollo 11 mission a few months earlier, and they wanted to see how the moon would respond to a known impact event. Picture the team in the seismic monitoring room in Houston. The needle should twitch, settle, and go quiet within a few minutes. That's what a solid rocky body does when you hit it. The vibrations dampen as the energy disperses through dense material. That's not what happened. The moon rang like a bell. For over an hour, the seismometers recorded continuous vibrations. Reverberations that lasted far longer than they should have if the moon were a solid natural body made of rock and iron like Earth's core. When you hit a hollow object, or an object with a shell-like structure surrounding a less dense interior, it resonates, it rings. The data showed the moon behaving exactly like a hollow sphere. Dr. Yoshio Nakamura, working out of the University of Texas at Austin, was one of the leading seismologists who reviewed the Apollo data. He spent years staring at those waveforms. In his official report, he noted that the seismic waves propagated through the moon in a way that suggested either a hollow interior or a rigid outer shell surrounding a much less dense core. He didn't outright say the moon was hollow. He said the data indicated it behaves as if it were. That's a careful distinction. And it matters, because admitting the moon might actually be hollow would open a door mainstream science is not prepared to walk through. Nakamura's findings were published in academic journals. Then they were quietly buried under jargon nobody outside specialist circles would read. The official NASA explanation was that the moon's interior is just unusual. Its composition creates unexpected seismic behavior. Nothing to see here. Move along. But Dr. Gordon MacDonald, a geophysicist and scientific advisor to NASA during the height of the Apollo program in the 1960s, wasn't satisfied with that explanation. MacDonald was the kind of advisor who sat in rooms with mission directors, not a fringe voice, an insider. And he went on record stating that, based on the density measurements, gravitational data, and seismic readings, the moon appears to be more like a hollow sphere than a homogeneous planetary body. He didn't claim it was hollow, he said it appears that way. And he couldn't explain why using any natural formation model that existed at the time. NASA archived his findings. The data is still there, buried in technical reports most people will never read. And the seismic data wasn't even the strangest thing the Apollo missions brought back.
There are other tablets in the museums of the world which mention one of the principal members in our text, Mr. Bali, as his name is.
Because 2 years later, Apollo 14 returned with rocks that contained something nobody could explain. The metals that shouldn't exist. In January 1971, Apollo 14 brought back rock samples from the Fra Mauro Highlands. The samples went straight to the Lunar Receiving Lab, and when geologists opened the containers, they found something they weren't expecting. Processed metals, not raw ore, not natural mineral deposits. Processed metals, brass, an alloy of copper and zinc that requires smelting at high temperatures, mica, a mineral used in electrical insulation, titanium, one of the strongest and most heat-resistant metals known to science, and uranium-236, a radioactive isotope that absolutely does not occur in nature. Stop on that one. Uranium-236. Uranium-236 is a byproduct of nuclear fission. You only find it in spent nuclear fuel rods, in the aftermath of nuclear weapons testing, or inside the active core of a nuclear reactor. It's an artificial isotope created when uranium-235 absorbs a neutron during a fission reaction. There is no natural process on the moon, or anywhere else in the solar system, that creates uranium-236. So, how did it get there? Dr. Harold Urey was the man asked to answer that question. Urey wasn't just any chemist. He'd won the Nobel Prize. He'd worked on the Manhattan Project. He knew, more intimately than almost anyone alive, exactly what uranium-236 was and where it could come from. NASA brought him in personally to examine the lunar samples. In a 1972 interview, Urey admitted he was completely baffled. He said the moon's composition was unlike anything seen in natural satellite formation anywhere in the solar system. The isotopic ratios didn't match Earth. The mineral content didn't match any known asteroid or comet.
Well, of course you're going to signify a person with wings because they came from the sky.
The presence of processed metals and radioactive isotopes that shouldn't exist in nature suggested, in his words, an origin that current models cannot adequately explain. He stopped just short of saying the moon was artificial, but he couldn't explain the data using conventional planetary science. NASA published his findings in the technical journals, and then the subject quietly disappeared from public discussion. Urey himself never spoke about it again. When asked about uranium-236 in later years, he would deflect, saying more research was needed, but no follow-up research was ever conducted. The samples are still stored at NASA, the data is still there, and the next anomaly is even harder to wave away. Because it's not about what's inside the moon, it's about where the moon is sitting. A circle too perfect, the orbit. This is where the math stops cooperating with the natural formation story. The moon is the only major satellite in our entire solar system, with a nearly perfect circular orbit around its parent planet. Every other moon we've observed wobbles, follows an elliptical path, experiences orbital decay, shows signs of gravitational capture from a chaotic past. Jupiter's moons have wildly elliptical orbits. Saturn's moons tilt and precess. Mars's 2 moons are slowly spiraling inward and will eventually crash into the planet. But Earth's moon maintains a nearly perfect circle, deviating less than 1% from true circularity. That level of precision is statistically improbable for a natural satellite, and it gets stranger. The moon is locked in synchronous rotation. The exact same side always faces Earth. From the ground, you never see the far side. Astronomers call this tidal locking. And while tidal locking can occur naturally over billions of years, the precision with which Earth's moon achieved this lock is remarkable. It's not just tidally locked, it's perfectly tidally locked. No wobble, no vibration beyond the minimal amount caused by its slightly elliptical orbit. In the 1980s, Dr. Erwin Shapiro at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics decided to run the actual numbers. Shapiro is not a fringe figure. He's one of the most respected astrophysicists of the 20th century. He ran the calculations on the probability of the moon naturally achieving this exact orbital configuration. His published findings stated that while tidal locking is possible through natural processes, the odds of it occurring with this degree of precision, combined with the near-perfect circular orbit, combined with the moon being exactly the right size to create total solar eclipses as seen from Earth, are extraordinarily low, not impossible, but highly improbable. In his own words, the moon's orbital characteristics suggest a degree of fine-tuning that strains conventional formation models. Shapiro never said the moon was placed there intentionally. He's a careful man. He doesn't make claims he can't back, but he did say the math doesn't favor a random natural process. It looks engineered, as if someone positioned it there with deliberate intent.
Rethink the history of technology completely as a result of this single object.
And then maintain that position over time, which is almost word for word what the Sumerian tablet had already claimed 4,000 years earlier. And the question of why somebody would do that has an answer the tablet provides in unsettling detail. The staging platform, the tablet doesn't just describe what's inside the moon, it describes why it's there. And every reason it gives points back to the moon as a piece of infrastructure built for a job. The Sumerian account describes the Anunnaki as beings who arrived on Earth approximately 450,000 years ago. Their home world, Nibiru, was on a highly elliptical 3,600-year orbit around the sun. They came for gold, not because they valued it as currency. Gold had a functional purpose. Their atmosphere was deteriorating, and suspending fine gold particles in the upper atmosphere could create a reflective layer to stabilize their climate. That isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. Modern geoengineering proposals from MIT and Harvard have suggested using reflective particles in Earth's atmosphere to combat climate change. The same principle, different scale. And here's where the moon fits in. Massive resource extraction on Earth requires an orbital staging platform, somewhere to process raw material before shipping it off-world, somewhere out of the gravity well. The tablet describes great ships docking with the moon's northern pole, a spaceport, not on the surface of Earth, in orbit. The chambers inside the moon weren't just observation posts, they were processing facilities, storage, a way station. And the gold extraction wasn't theoretical. In southern Africa, in places like the Witwatersrand Basin and Mpumalanga province, there are ancient mining sites that date back over 100,000 years. Deep shaft mines, engineered excavation systems. Mainstream archaeology says these were dug by early modern humans. But 100,000 years ago, humans were barely using stone tools. So, who dug them, and where did the gold go? Then in 2014, NASA scientists analyzing lunar samples discovered something that locks this whole picture together. High concentrations of helium-3, a rare isotope that doesn't exist in significant quantities on Earth. Helium-3 is considered the ideal fuel for nuclear fusion, clean, efficient. Scientists have theorized for decades that helium-3 could power interstellar spacecraft, and the moon is covered in it. Billions of tons embedded in the surface. If you were an advanced civilization operating mining ships across interstellar distances, a moon rich in helium-3 wouldn't just be a staging platform. It would be your refueling station. Mine it, process it, store it in the interior chambers. Exactly what Tablet 63 describes. And there's a place on the moon nobody has ever properly investigated until very recently. The side we never see. The far side opened up in January 2019. China's Chang'e 4 mission became the first spacecraft in history to successfully land on the lunar far side. the hemisphere we never see from Earth because of that perfect tidal lock. This wasn't just a symbolic achievement. The far side is a communications dead zone. No direct line of sight to Earth. China had to launch a relay satellite into orbit around the moon just to communicate with the lander.
The writing, you look for key things like maybe there are numbers, and very quickly you'll get an idea of roughly what it is.
They knew they were going somewhere nobody had ever set instruments down before, and they did it. What they sent back wasn't supposed to be there. Ground-penetrating radar scans revealed massive geometric structures beneath the surface. Tunnels, cavities, voids, running deep into the moon's crust in patterns that appeared organized, not random. Chinese scientists initially described them as lava tubes, underground channels naturally formed billions of years ago when the moon was volcanically active. That's the safe explanation, the textbook explanation, the one that doesn't get your funding pulled. The problem is the moon has been geologically dead for over 1 billion years. No volcanic activity, no tectonic movement, no internal heat source that would create lava flows. So, where did these tunnels come from? And why do they form geometric patterns? Dr. Jianqing Feng, a planetary geologist with the Chinese Academy of Sciences, was directly involved in analyzing the Chang'e data. Feng spent months going through the radar profiles with his team in Beijing. When he finally gave a statement to the press, every word was measured. He said that while lava tubes were the most likely natural explanation, some of the formations didn't fit existing models of lunar volcanic activity. The tunnels were too uniform, too straight, too deep. He stopped short of calling them artificial. But the data raised questions that couldn't be easily answered. The Chang'e findings were forwarded to NASA, the European Space Agency, and space agencies in Russia and Japan. No public conclusions have been released. No follow-up missions have been announced. And the mainstream narrative remains the same. Lava tubes, natural formations. Nothing unusual. Now, ask yourself why everyone went so quiet at the same time. Older than the planet, it orbits. There's one more anomaly, and it might be the strangest of them all. Rocks brought back from the Apollo missions were dated at 4.5 billion years old, older than Earth itself. That should be impossible. Natural satellites form from the debris of their parent planet. They should be the same age or younger, not older. Dr. William Hartmann is one of the most respected lunar geologists alive. He proposed the giant impact hypothesis to explain this discrepancy. A Mars-sized object collided with Earth in the distant past, and the debris that flew off into orbit eventually coalesced into the moon. It's the mainstream explanation, the one in every textbook. But even Hartmann admitted the timeline doesn't add up cleanly.
I would expect that it would be something to do with barley or sheep as the foundations of the economy.
If the moon formed from Earth's debris, it shouldn't contain rocks older than Earth itself, unless the moon didn't form here, unless it came from somewhere else. The Sumerian tablet doesn't just allow for this possibility, it states it outright. The moon arrived in Earth's orbit long after Earth itself had formed. It was brought here as a fully formed object, already ancient, a relic from another part of the galaxy, positioned here for a purpose. The Anunnaki didn't create the moon, they found it, repurposed it, brought it here. Soviet scientists Mikhail Vasin and Alexander Shcherbakov, respected members of the Soviet Academy of Sciences, published a paper in the 1970s that came to a similar conclusion through completely independent analysis. They examined the moon's density, seismic data, and orbital characteristics. Their conclusion? The moon could be an artificial construct, a planetoid that was hollowed out and equipped with technology by an advanced civilization. The paper presented this as a hypothesis that fit the available data. NASA never formally endorsed it. They never debunked it either. It was quietly archived. And then there are the photographs. In 1976, George Leonard, a NASA consultant, published a book called Somebody Else is on the Moon. Leonard had spent years sitting in NASA's photo archives in Houston, going through hundreds of high-resolution Apollo images, page by page. He claimed to have identified structures on the lunar surface, towers, bridges, geometric patterns that couldn't be explained. By natural geology, NASA dismissed his findings as shadows and optical illusions. In 2007, Japanese astronomer Yoichi Shigaraki re-examined the same photos using modern imaging software. He found the same structures, and more. He identified what appeared to be mining equipment near the moon's south pole. Rusted, ancient, non-functional. Shigaraki never claimed they were alien. He just said they shouldn't be there. That's not a guess, that's the data. From two researchers working 40 years apart, looking at the same photographs, reaching the same conclusion. What is overhead right now? The Sumerian tablet ends with a warning. It states that the Anunnaki will return when Nibiru completes its orbit and re-enters the inner solar system. When they do, the moon reactivates. The chambers light up. The engines come back online. Astronomers have recently identified unusual gravitational anomalies in the outer solar system. Something massive is pulling on the orbits of distant objects. They've named it Planet 9. Its projected orbit is approximately 10,000 to 20,000 years, close enough to the Sumerian 3,600-year cycle that some researchers believe they're describing the same object. NASA denies any connection, but they haven't found Planet 9 yet. They just know something is out there. And if the tablet is right about what it is, the moon is what wakes up first. So, what do we do with all of this? The mainstream explanation is that the Sumerians were primitive people who didn't understand astronomy and filled the gaps with mythology. But the Sumerians knew about Uranus and Neptune thousands of years before modern telescopes confirmed them. They described the solar system as heliocentric, with the sun at the center over 4,000 years before Copernicus. They weren't guessing, they were recording. The evidence doesn't prove the moon is artificial, but it doesn't disprove it either. What we have are anomalies, data points that don't fit, an ancient text that describes engineering concepts its authors shouldn't have understood, and a moon that behaves in ways that make scientists uncomfortable enough to bury the data in journals nobody reads. Maybe it's all coincidence. Or maybe the Sumerians wrote down what they were told by beings who knew exactly what the moon was, because they're the ones who brought it here. So here's the question I want you sitting with tonight, the next time you walk outside and look up. If that thing in the sky was placed there deliberately by someone, and the data we've collected for 50 years keeps lining up with a 4,000-year-old tablet nobody was supposed to read, then the only question left is who's looking back? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want to go deeper into the Anunnaki timeline and what the Sumerians said about genetic engineering, that video is on screen now. Click it. I'll see you in the next one.